Welcome back to a special edition of the Weekly Education Pulse. I'm Sammy.
And I'm Tony. Today we're wrapping up the entire year with a look back at the stories that shaped international education in 2025.
And before we get into the trends, here's a number that surprised even us. Across all of our episodes this year, we covered a total of 112 individual news stories from all over the world.
Taken together, these 112 stories across 32 episodes paint a very clear picture of how fast the sector is changing and where the pressure points and opportunities are emerging.
So today, we're stepping back, connecting the dots, and asking the bigger question. What did 2025 actually look like for international schools?
Let's start with policy, because although we only covered 6 formal policy stories this year, the impact of those 6 was enormous. These were stories that clarified national priorities and shaped what schools could or could not do.
Yeah, we saw Portugal tighten its oversight over private and international schools. Finland restructured its integration of adult learning pathways. India moved further into implementing the national education policy, bringing new expectations for international curricula. And Japan increased access to English medium programs at the university level.
Across the Gulf, we saw ministries sharpening their expectations around compliance, transparency, and assessment data. The message was consistent. International education is now central to economic strategy, so regulators want alignment and accountability.
So 6 stories does not sound like a lot, but the scale of change behind them made policy one of the defining forces of 2025. And our next biggest volume of activity was around new school openings and expansions. Around 18 of the 112 stories we covered this year were about new campuses, new sites, or expansions of current school groups.
The geographic spread was huge. The Gulf continued its rapid development. India was unstoppable, especially beyond the big metros. Now, Vietnam still growing. Japan remains quietly attractive, and we saw in Europe, Africa, and parts of Southeast Asia that would not have been on the radar 5 years ago.
Yeah, it was not just growth for the sake of growth. Groups were building networks, owners were entering new price points, bilingual models have scaled up, and mid-market expansion accelerated. And also, hybrid models made an early appearance.
So if the last decade was about flagship campus, then 2025 was very clearly about strategic networks and diversification. Another category that dominated this year was curriculum. This accounted around 25 curriculum-related stories from our 112.
Yeah, and these stories all pointed to the same trend. Curricula have become one of the biggest levers schools use to compete and differentiate. Schools were adding A-levels, IB diploma, Cambridge pathways, bilingual tracks, or English medium streams to meet changing family expectations.
This was also the year where national systems moved further into internationalisation. Japan, Korea, India, and the UAE, schools and governments are aligning their programs with global pathways and global universities.
Yeah, curriculum used to be a marker of identity. In 2025, it became a strategy. And teacher supply and workforce stories in our next topic area accounted for 8 of the 112 stories, and they were consistent across almost every region.
Yeah, salary pressure, visa bottlenecks, recruitment challenges, delays, retention issues, training expectations that kept increasing.
And underlying all of this was well-being. Schools were very aware of teacher burnout, workload, and the strain that comes with high demand and tight labour markets.
So every region seems to have the same question. How do we attract teachers, support them, retain them, and help them thrive? This is not a niche issue. It is a structural bottleneck. And perhaps not a big surprise, AI and digital transformation was the largest single theme of the year. We counted 32 stories that directly linked to AI, digital exams, edtech consolidation, or the broader digital ecosystem in schools.
Yeah, and the tone of those stories changed. In 2024, AI was still the interesting new technology, but in 2025, AI became infrastructure. Schools were writing policies, training teachers, preparing for wider digital exam adoption, and integrating AI into planning, marking, reporting, and communication.
We also saw a shift in expectation. It's no longer about experimenting. It's about ensuring the school has a clear, responsible, and well-communicated approach to AI.
Yeah, and 2026 is shaping up to be the year where AI becomes baked into the daily academic and administrative systems of schools. And moving to the next topic area, we also saw 8 stories linked to well-being, inclusion, and student agency. And while it was not the biggest category, it represented one of the most important shifts.
Schools are investing more in mental health support. Government strengthened SEND and EAL policies. Schools talked more about culture, belonging, and student voice.
And parents increasingly made decisions based on the quality of pastoral care, not just academics. The definition of excellence widened in 2025.
And finally, we had 14 stories linked to families, affordability, and shifting demand.
Yeah, parents drove the market this year. We saw growing interest in bilingual pathways, increasing sensitivity to fees, families moving countries for education, rising expectations for safety, well-being, flexibility, and of course, value.
Schools adapted, they fine-tuned their offerings, added pathways, introduced flexible route options, and they communicated more transparently about outcomes.
Yeah, this is one of the clearest signals of 2025. Parents were more informed, more empowered, and more selective than ever. And before we wrap up, it's worth stepping back and asking what all of this actually means. So when we look at across the 112 stories, the themes are distinct, but together they tell a very clear story about where international education went in 2025.
Big picture is that this year was defined by a movement and recalibration. Governments adjusted regulations, school groups expanded, curricula shifted, and technology accelerated. At the same time, teachers, students, and families reshaped the human side of schooling. Everything is in motion.
Yeah, if we cluster the news into major topic areas, strong narrative emerges. There was a rise of AI, digital infrastructure, which became the single largest theme. There was the strategic expansion of school networks, especially in Asia and the Gulf. And there was a clear shift towards curriculum diversification. And there was the constant pressure on teacher supply and well-being.
And you have that family piece. Demand is changing. Expectations are changing. Affordability is a real consideration. Families want flexibility, bilingual options, safety, well-being, and a clear sense of value. Schools reacted by adapting pathways and strengthening their offer.
So put together, these themes define 2025 as a year where the sector became more complex, more competitive, and more globally interconnected. Schools were being asked to perform at a higher level, respond more quickly to shifts in demand, and adopt new tools and models at a much faster pace.
Despite the complexity, schools continue to innovate. They continue to open, they continue to widen access, they continue to find ways to support their teachers and students.
So when we look back at 2025, it wasn't just another year of growth, it was a year of alignment. Schools aligning with technology, with regulation, with shifting expectations, and aligning with what families want education to be in the years ahead.
So that was 2025, 112 stories, 32 about AI, 25 about curricula, 18 about new schools and expansion, 14 about parents and demand, 8 about teachers, 8 about inclusion and well-being, and 6 major policy stories that shaped everything else.
And we want to thank you for joining us each week as we tracked all of this in real time. So thank you for the comments, messages, and also the debates. This year the audience has grown, the discussions have widened, and we've heard from school leaders in every region of the world.
We'll be back in January with our first weekly education pulse of 2026. Until then, have a restful break and a great start to the new year.
Until then, we'll see you then.